Six men, a steel tube the size of a camper van, 300 feet below the ocean surface, sealed inside for 28 days straight. But almost nobody on the surface knows what their life actually looks like down there. Every subsea pipeline at 300 feet needs human hands to maintain it. Conventional divers decompress after every dive. At that depth, decompression alone takes hours. Saturation diving solves that problem. Pressurize once, work indefinitely, decompress once at the end. North Sea, early 1970s. The first commercial saturation dives were conducted with decompression tables that were, by modern standards, dangerously incomplete. The day a saturation diver starts a hitch, it begins quietly. Medical checks first. Blood pressure, lung function, a psychological baseline. Gear inspection follows, methodical and unhurried, because nothing gets fixed once that hatch seals. Then the chamber door closes with a sound that every diver describes the same way: final. The pressurization team outside begins feeding gas into the system. Almost immediately, the body responds. Ears pop hard, the way they do on a descending aircraft, but faster and more insistent. The air thickens, it feels heavier in the lungs, almost syrupy. And then the temperature spikes during compression, sometimes climbing 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit inside the chamber within the first hour. It is deeply uncomfortable in a way that is difficult to describe to someone who has never experienced it. In the years ahead, every saturation diver who signed on would understand exactly what this meant, not as a career, but as a way of life with no easy exit. But the bigger change is the gas itself. Normal air is 78% nitrogen, and at depth, nitrogen causes narcosis, a dangerous, disorienting intoxication that has killed divers who didn't understand what was happening to them. Saturation divers breathe heliox instead, a precise mixture of helium and oxygen, calibrated to the working depth. The nitrogen narcosis risk disappears, but helium carries its own signature. The moment heliox enters the system, every voice in the chamber transforms. 6 grown men suddenly sound like cartoon characters, high-pitched and squeaky, their words almost incomprehensible. Topside supervisors use helium voice unscramblers, electronic devices that drop the pitch back down to something intelligible. Without them, communication between the chamber and the surface would be nearly impossible. That's the kind of number that makes accountants cry, and that's before anyone has even left the chamber. Now picture the living space. 6 men, roughly 30 to 40 square meters including adjoining chambers. Inside, bunks stacked close, a small table, a shower, a toilet. Every personal item fits on a shelf the size of a carry-on bag. There is no corner to disappear into, no door to close, no moment of genuine privacy for 28 days straight. The same pressure that made saturation diving physiologically viable was about to reshape every aspect of how these men live, think, and hold themselves together. Think of the diving bell as an elevator that connects 2 impossible worlds: the pressurized chamber on deck and the pitch-black seabed 300 feet below. The bell locks directly onto the chamber system through a pressurized trunk, meaning divers transfer from their living quarters into the bell without ever encountering atmospheric pressure. The integrity of the saturation environment is never broken. The bell descends. 300 feet of water column passes outside the viewport, the light fading from deep blue to absolute black somewhere around the 150-foot mark. At the worksite, the bell stabilizes, and 2 divers exit on umbilicals, those critical lifelines carrying breathing gas, communications, and the hot water that circulates through their suits to prevent fatal hypothermia. The 3rd diver stays inside the bell as standby, ready to respond if anything goes wrong outside. A typical bell run lasts 6 hours at working depth. 6 hours of rotating 2 divers through the tasks while the bell itself acts as a pressurized base station just meters away. North Sea diver Liam, with 8 years in saturation, describes working at 140 to 150 meters as something that defies easy explanation. The cold is bone deep, he says. Not surface cold, not wet cold, but a cold that gets into the joints and stays there, regardless of the hot water suit. Visibility in the North Sea frequently drops to near zero, silt disturbed by current or the diver's own movement swallowing whatever light the helmet torch throws out. Hands work by feel. Every valve, every bolt, every connection point identified through touch alone. The tasks themselves read like a maintenance checklist for a world most people will never see. Pipeline repairs, valve operations, subsea infrastructure inspections, anode replacements on structures the size of buildings. Every one of these jobs performed in conditions, the pressure, the cold, the darkness, the physiological load of breathing dense heliox that would incapacitate an unprepared person within minutes and kill them shortly after. The bell surfaces. The divers transfer back through the trunk, and the chamber door seals again behind them. The world above still completely out of reach. Food arrives through a medical lock, a small pressurized airlock built into the chamber wall, just large enough to pass a meal tray, a medication package, or a replacement piece of equipment through without altering the internal pressure. It is the chamber's only metabolic connection to the surface world. Everything that sustains 6 men for 28 days passes through that small hatch. But here is the detail that nobody fully accounted for when saturation diving was first commercialized. Nobody fully anticipated what prolonged confinement at pressure would do to the human sleep cycle. The chamber is never quiet. Pressure adjustments happen around the clock as the system compensates for minor fluctuations. 6 men on rotating dive schedules means someone is always preparing to go out, coming back in, or recovering from a bell run. There is no synchronized night. There is no darkness. The lighting inside the chamber runs on a controlled cycle, but the body's circadian rhythm begins breaking down within the first week for most divers, disrupted by the artificial light, the constant low-level noise, and the relentless pressure of living at depth. Personal space is defined by a bunk and a small shelf. That is the full extent of it. Every argument happens in front of 5 other men. Every bad mood is visible. Every moment of frustration, fear, or homesickness plays out in a room the size of a bathroom, with no exit and no escape valve. There is no walking it off. There is no going outside to clear your head. This is why psychological screening is not an afterthought in saturation diving. It is a core qualification. Candidates are evaluated not just for technical skill, but for emotional regulation, conflict tolerance, and the ability to function in extreme confinement without destabilizing the team around them. Crew compatibility is taken seriously by diving supervisors. A single psychologically unsuitable diver in a 6-man chamber does not just suffer personally, they become a risk to everyone sealed in with them. The day rate for a working saturation diver during an active hitch reaches the equivalent of $30,000 to $45,000 per month. Written out, that number looks extraordinary. In context, it is the only number that makes any sense at all. In the years ahead, every saturation diver who reads that figure would understand exactly what this meant, not as compensation, but as the industry's acknowledgement of what it is actually asking a human being to do. That figure covers 28 days of continuous confinement at pressure, life-threatening physical risk on every bell run, and a level of specialized skill that takes years of commercial diving experience to build. You cannot walk into saturation diving. The path runs through surface diving, then air diving, then mixed gas work, accumulating certifications and logged hours across years before a diver qualifies for a saturation ticket. The investment of time and physical wear is front-loaded and significant. Between hitches, saturation divers are not simply on vacation. There is mandatory surface recovery time built into the schedule. The body needs to off-gas completely, joints need to decompress, and the mind needs genuine rest before the psychological baseline resets. The Diving Medical Advisory Committee, known as DMAC, caps cumulative saturation time at 182 days in any 12-month period. The body simply cannot sustain more than that without the long-term damage becoming irreversible. Every saturation diver who stayed in the system long enough would look back on that cap and wish the industry had arrived at it sooner. Most saturation divers complete 4 to 6 hitches per year at maximum. The annual income is genuinely high, but the lifestyle cost, the time away, The physical degradation, the psychological weight of repeated confinement runs in a parallel column that no paycheck fully balances. The money is real, so is everything it costs to earn it. The 28-day seal-to-seal limit is not an arbitrary number. DMAC sets it as the global standard for saturation exposure, and the reasoning behind it reaches into physiology that most people never encounter. Beyond 28 days at pressure, bone density loss accelerates measurably. Immune function degrades. Psychological deterioration becomes not just anecdotal, but clinically trackable. You'd think someone would have said something. Nobody did. Not loudly enough, not early enough in the industry's history, which is part of why aseptic bone necrosis became a documented occupational hazard among long-career saturation divers. The condition involves the death of bone tissue caused by disrupted blood supply, a direct consequence of cumulative saturation exposure. It is permanent, it is progressive, and it is the reason the 182-day annual cap exists. Because the damage from repeated saturation hitches compounds in ways that a single exposure does not reveal. At a storage depth of 300 feet, decompression alone takes approximately 4 days. The calculation runs roughly 1 day per 100 feet of depth, plus an additional stage day of pressure reduction at the end. That means the final phase of every hitch, after the work is done, after the bell runs are complete, is 4 days of enforced confinement, inactive, waiting. The pressure drops in increments measured in fractions of a bar. The body off-gasses slowly, nitrogen and helium working back out of tissues at a rate that cannot be safely accelerated. Those decompression days carry their own psychological weight. The job is finished, the surface is close, but the hatch stays sealed, and every diver who has ever sat through those final 4 days describes the waiting as its own ordeal. The one part of the hitch that never gets easier, no matter how many times they have done it. Saturation diver Chris Lemons is working at approximately 330 feet below the surface when the dive support vessel above him loses dynamic positioning. The computer-controlled system that holds the vessel stationary over the worksite in open water. The vessel drifts. The umbilical, the single lifeline carrying Lemons' breathing gas, communications, and hot water heating, stretches under the tension until it snaps. Pay attention to this next detail because it explains everything. Lemons' emergency bailout gas supply at 330 feet provides approximately 5 minutes of breathing time. He exhausts it. He loses consciousness on the seabed floor, alone in the dark, with no gas and no communication and no heating, in water cold enough to kill a person in minutes through hypothermia alone. His dive team does something that the physics of the situation suggested was nearly impossible. They managed to return the bell to his location, navigating back to an unconscious diver on a dark seabed without a functioning umbilical to guide them. Lemons is recovered after 30 to 35 minutes without breathing gas. He is brought back to the bell. He is resuscitated. He survives. The medical explanation is incomplete in the most literal sense. Physicians describe his survival as physiologically extraordinary. The leading theory is that the near-freezing water temperature slowed his metabolism dramatically, reducing the brain's oxygen demand enough to prevent the cell death that should have been irreversible. The cold that makes saturation diving so brutal may be the same thing that kept him alive. Lemons returned to diving. The story is documented in the film Last Breath, released in 2019. 6 men sealed together for 28 days either forge something unbreakable or fall apart entirely. The conditions do not allow for middle ground. The pressure, literal and psychological, compresses every interpersonal dynamic until the genuine ones are all that remain. Liam, the North Sea saturation diver with 8 years in the system, describes the chamber crew during a hitch as closer than family, in a way that people who haven't experienced it find difficult to believe. You know each other's breathing patterns, he says. You know the sound of each other's sleep. You know exactly where the line is for every man in that chamber, and you know it because you've watched them approach it and hold. The offshore oil industry runs on this. Every subsea repair on a North Sea pipeline, every critical infrastructure inspection at depth, Every valve operation on a wellhead sitting 300 feet down depends on the small number of people qualified and willing to live inside a pressurized steel tube to get it done. The global saturation diving workforce is estimated at fewer than 3,000 active practitioners worldwide. 3,000 people maintaining the subsea infrastructure that the energy economy depends on. When the hatch finally opens after decompression, after 4 days of waiting, after 28 days sealed inside, divers describe the first breath of fresh air as a physical event, not a relief, an impact, like the world rushing back in all at once. Saturation divers could stop after one hitch. Most don't. The money matters, genuinely. But the divers who stay in the system longest are clear about what actually keeps them returning. It is the identity. Being one of the few hundred people on Earth capable of doing this specific thing in this specific way under these specific conditions. That identity does not dissolve when the hatch opens. It waits for the next hitch. The technology keeping these men alive is more precise than most people realize, and it has been refined through failures that the industry does not widely advertise. The same engineering that built saturation diving's safety record was about to be tested in ways nobody had fully anticipated. Modern dive support vessels carry life support systems capable of sustaining a full saturation spread for a minimum of 72 hours on emergency backup alone, enough time to manage a serious incident, attempt a rescue, or begin a controlled emergency decompression if the primary systems fail. Saturation systems are engineered with redundancy layered on redundancy. Backup gas supplies, secondary monitoring systems, independent pressure control circuits, because the margin for error at 300 feet is measured in seconds, not minutes. The Norwegian oil industry, following the development of North Sea fields from the 1970s onward, drove much of this engineering forward, investing in saturation technology that became the global benchmark. Companies like Subsea 7 and Technip Energies operate dive support vessels with saturation systems that represent decades of accumulated incident data translated into engineering standards. The early saturation programs of the 1960s and 1970s, run by the U.S. Navy and commercial operators like Taylor Diving, were conducted with equipment and procedures that modern practitioners would consider alarmingly primitive. Men went to depth on theoretical decompression tables that had never been validated at scale. Some came back fine, some didn't. The industry learned. The protocols tightened. The DMAC guidelines, the IMCA standards, the vessel certification requirements, all of it built on a foundation of incidents that were expensive in every possible sense of the word. 3,000 people, a steel tube, 300 feet down, holding the energy economy together from the inside. Watch the next video now.